guys, it's Jasma, and today we're going to make red velvet cupcakes for Valentine's Day. These cupcakes are nice and moist, very fluffy, and also very delicious, and we're going to decorate it to look very pretty for Valentine's Day. So let's get started. For the ingredients you will need 1 1/4 cups of all-purpose flour, 2 tablespoons of cocoa powder, half a teaspoon of salt, 1 teaspoon of baking powder, 1 cup of white sugar, 3/4 cup of oil, 1 egg, 1 teaspoon of red gel food coloring, half a teaspoon of vanilla extract, half a cup of buttermilk, half a teaspoon of baking soda, and 1 teaspoon of white vinegar. And for the cream cheese frosting you will need 5 ounces of cream cheese softened at room temperature, 2 ounces of unsalted butter also softened at room temperature, 1 to 2 tablespoons of heavy cream, half a cup of icing sugar, half a teaspoon of vanilla extract, and a 1/3 cup of red candy nuts. First off, we're going to mix together our dry ingredients. So in a bowl, I have some all-purpose flour. I'm going to add in the cocoa powder. We're adding in cocoa powder because a red velvet cupcake is supposed to be a chocolate cupcake, except it's dyed red. Then we're going to add in the baking powder and the salt. Now we'll pass the dry ingredients through a sieve to get rid of any lumps and to add some air. Then just set this aside, and now we can mix our wet ingredients. So I'm going to be mixing my batter in a stand mixer today. You could also use a hand mixer or do this by hand. Into the mixer bowl, we're going to add it in the oil. I'm using canola oil today, but you could use any flavorless oil. Add in the sugar. Then mix it just until it's combined. A couple seconds will do the trick. So now crack in 1 egg, pour in the vanilla extract, then once again mix until combined. Before we add the dry ingredients into the bowl, we're going to mix together the red food coloring with a little bit of the buttermilk, so it's easier to incorporate into the batter later. Now if you can't buy any buttermilk, you can make it yourself like I did. All you have to do is mix half a cup of whole milk with 1 teaspoon of white vinegar, mix it up, let it sit for around 15 minutes, and then it's ready to use. So I'm going to pour a little bit of the buttermilk into this bowl. If you're using liquid food coloring, you could completely skip this step and just add it into the batter right away. But I'm using food coloring paste, which I like to use since it's more concentrated, so I have to thin it out in the milk, which makes it easier to mix into the batter. Once you've mixed the food coloring into the buttermilk and there are no more clumps left, we can move on to finishing the batter. Now I'm using 1 teaspoon of red food coloring paste today, but you could change the amount depending on how red you want to make the cupcakes. And if you're using liquid food coloring, you want to change the amount to 1 tablespoon. Scrape down the bowl and the beater. I want to make sure everything is nice and combined. Now add half of the dry ingredients into the wet ingredients. Mix that through. Scrape down the bowl. Now you can see the color changed a lot once we added in the dry ingredients because there was cocoa powder in this, but it's okay, we could just add more coloring later. And then pour in the buttermilk. Mix it through. And add in the last bit of dry ingredients. And now you could adjust the color, so I'm just going to add a little more red food coloring to make it more bright because it's going to darken a little more when it bakes. I'm mixing the paste with a little bit of water to thin it out. Once again, to make it easier to mix into the batter without it clumping up. Alright, it's ready. So I'm going to add this straight into the batter. So I'm happy with the color. Now we're going to do our final step. I have some white vinegar and baking soda, and we're going to mix it together, which is going to fizz up. We're going to add it into the batter and mix it through. This is going to help the cupcake rise and also create some air bubbles inside the cupcakes. So I'm going to add the vinegar right into the baking soda. Give it a little wiggle to make sure it's all mixed through. And then add it into the batter. Now mix it through. I have a baking tray lined with some cupcake liners, and I have an ice cream scoop which I'm going to use to scoop the batter into the cupcake liners evenly. You want to fill them around 3/4 of the way full and then get it right into the oven. Now tap it on the counter a couple of times to release all of the air bubbles. Now we're going to bake this in the oven preheated at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 20 minutes. And to test if it is done, just insert a toothpick right into the center, and if it comes out clean, that means it is cooked. To make the toppings, I have some red candy melts here, which I'm going to melt in the microwave. If you don't have red candy melts, you could also just dye white chocolate red, but if it starts seizing, add some coconut oil to thin it out. It's been 45 seconds. I'm going to give it a stir. Now I'm going to microwave this for another 45 seconds. So now just give it a stir until it's completely melted. And you can see this is quite thin, which is great because it's going to make it a lot easier to pipe. And if your chocolate is too thick, you could just add some coconut oil to thin it out. Once the chocolate is melted, we could start to pipe out the chocolate hearts. Today I'm going to be using this chocolate pen, which also works for frosting when it comes to writing. It makes it a lot easier to pipe out things because it'll feel like you're holding a pen, and that just makes it a lot easier. But if you don't have this, of course you could use a regular Ziploc bag and snip off the tip. So I'm going to fill this chocolate pen. So now before I pipe it onto the silicone mat, I made myself a little paper template to make sure the heart is nice and even. You don't have to do this, but I'm going to do it to make sure that it looks nice. And then just pipe out the chocolate. I'm using a stencil today. You could freehand it if you like to. Don't worry if you mess up because you could also scrape it off or fix it up with a toothpick. Try to make it nice and thick so it doesn't break that easily. Now I'm going to use a toothpick to fix up the shape. Make the line nice and even. Try to work kind of fast because the chocolate will start to set and you'll have to microwave it again. And the last thing I like to do is add a little stick on the bottom of the heart so you can stick this in the frosting and you can still see the entire heart. So now remove the stencil and pipe 12 of these. I made 12 hearts, and so now I'm going to let them set. We'll work on 12 smaller hearts. To make the smaller hearts, what I like to do is put 2 dots, and then just spread it out with a toothpick, then connect it. This is slightly easier than the big one because you don't have to worry about messing it up since you could always fix it up with a toothpick. Also add one of those little sticks on the bottom so you can stick it into the frosting. And now finally I'm going to write some words inside of the big heart, and I switched over to a Ziploc bag because the chocolate pen had a tip that was too thick to write with. Make sure whatever you write is connected so it doesn't fall apart. Out my chocolate toppings. You want to work really quickly when you're doing this because they set up really fast and you'll have to microwave it over and over again. So now I'm just going to set it aside for it to set completely. Now we're going to make a cream cheese frosting. I have made a cream cheese whipped frosting before, but this is a little bit different. I have some cream cheese and unsalted butter, both at room temperature. And this is very important because if they're at different temperatures, then it will clump up when we're beating the frosting. Because if the cream cheese is really cold and the butter is softened, when you add the cream cheese to the butter will harden up and it won't be a very smooth frosting. So again, make sure they're both at the same temperature. So today I'm going to be using my stand mixer. I have a paddle attachment, but you could also use a hand mixer, but try not to do this by hand because it will take a very long time. So first I'm going to add in the softened and salted butter. I like to beat this a little bit before I add in the cream cheese. I'm going to scrape it on the bowl, and this is just to get the butter creamy and nice and airy. Now add in the cream cheese and make sure you're not using low-fat cream cheese here. Then just beat it until they're both nice and fluffy. Now we're going to add in the icing sugar, then beat until it is nice and fluffy again. Scrape the bowl again. And you always want to be constantly scraping down the bowl to make sure the ingredients are nice and combined. Add in the vanilla extract. Now beat on high speed for around 2 minutes. And finally, we're going to add in about a tablespoon or so of heavy cream. And the amount for this may vary because I'm just lightening this frosting up. The cream cheese frosting is now ready, so I'm going to load it into a piping bag. And today I'm going to be using a star tip. You can use whatever tip you like. I'm going to stand it up in a cup so I can fill it easily. The cupcake is baked in the oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 20 minutes. It is really soft and spongy, so when you touch it, it should spring back. And I inserted a toothpick into the center. It came out clean. That means it is cooked. I have let it cool completely, and now we can frost it with our cream cheese frosting. You could pipe the cream cheese frosting onto the cupcake however you like, but today I'm going to do a ruffle. So start at the center and just wiggle the piping tip around while you pipe, and then just tap it down a little bit to spread out the frosting. Finally, to finish off these cupcakes, we're going to place the chocolate toppings that we piped earlier on top. So we're going to take a cupcake, peel off the chocolate carefully, stick the chocolate into the frosting until it's nice and snug. Try to make sure it doesn't move around too much, and then place on the smaller heart. That's how you make red velvet cupcakes with cream cheese frosting. This cupcake is perfect for Valentine's Day. It is very soft and moist and very delicious as well. It is pretty and they are quite easy to make as well. So I definitely hope you could try them out. Thanks for watching. See you guys next time and happy Valentine's Day. This is a very soft and moist cupcake. It is perfect for Valentine's Day. It is also very